Hey everyone, quick note before I start. If you have not figured it out based on the title, the thumbnail, and the description, there will be spoilers in this discussion for both She-Hulk and Loki. You have been warned.
Tell me the spoilers, child.
Oh my goodness everyone, She-Hulk episode 9 has dropped a bombshell on us in regards to how Jen Walters and She-Hulk can interact with the world around her. We see her push her way out of her world after not feeling happy with the way that the story was going and entering what seems at first like our world. Like a world where Marvel writers are orchestrating her series of events, are trying to figure out her story. She decides she wants to talk to the man in charge himself, Kevin. Except that's where things deviate. You see, the Kevin in the show is not Kevin Feige, as I'm sure everyone was expecting, but a different Kevin, a robot Kevin, who is stationed in front of a whole bunch of screens trying to figure out the perfect story to tell. And that's where Jen Walters is able to negotiate with this robot Kevin and get him to change her story to be the way that she feels she needs it to be, to grow into herself as the She-Hulk and the lawyer. Now, the thing is, this is not in accordance with the way the MCU works to this point. We haven't seen a situation where the hero can separate themselves from the story that they're in, where the character is not taking themselves as seriously. Or have we? There's one other show where we can see people behind the curtain orchestrating the course of events of a character's life. And a character is pulled out of their story. And they can see it on a film strip on a screen in front of them, watching their life unfold apart from their own dictation. And we see them try to figure out a way to get their story back to the way they want it. But in that case, it's to no avail. Because the story is already written. The decisions have already been made. And Loki, in that case, can't change it. He's up against the TVA, unable to change the sacred timeline, the story that has been written by the TVA, by the timekeepers, or by the one above all of them, he who remains, who created the timekeepers and built the sacred timeline in the first place. Now, you may be saying to yourself, yeah, okay, but it's different. Because in Loki, he was entering the TVA. The TVA was part of the story we were watching. Loki can't interact with us, the viewers. She-Hulk is a parody in many ways. Jen Walters talks to us directly, the audience. She's telling the story. And so her jumping out is just breaking that fourth wall and going into the world that we know, taking that story a step removed. But I think you'll find there are more connections than originally meets the eye. In fact, I believe that the place Jen Walters arrived at is not our own world. It is not the world outside of She-Hulk. It is the world before the TVA. It is the world leading up to and creating the sacred timeline. So first off, the first point I want to look at is, what is the role of each of these groups? So first, what is the role of Kevin and the writers? You see, the job of Kevin is to figure out how to create this TV show and how the whole cinematic universe should fit together. He's trying to dictate the flow of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And when we see him here, he's still figuring things out. He's analyzing the data. He's trying to figure out what should be included and what should be removed. On the flip side, the job of the TVA is to enact the sacred timeline, to orchestrate what's already been decided. It is their job to put into play what is already decided to be included and what is already decided to be removed. It is their job to put the pieces together, not of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but of the sacred timeline. In the end, their two jobs are very similar. Whether you're putting on a TV show or a movie or a set of movies, or you're orchestrating how living beings are living their lives in their environment, in their world, in their universe. Either way, you have a universe that you are creating. One time where you're planning it out, and the other where you're putting the pieces into motion. So now that we see the similarities between the roles of the writers and Kevin and the TVA with their agents, the next question is, who's in control here? And this is where it really starts to get interesting. You see, in She-Hulk, we have a team of writers and a team of security guards and all these people working for a robot. A robot that sits in a little room in the middle of their campus and controls things from that little central area. Well, in the TVA, in Loki, we have agents and we have analysts, and they're all working for a set of robots who are living in a little room in the middle of their campus. Now, this feels like a plan of setting things up that has just too many similarities to be separate. This sounds like a plan that someone has enacted, and it worked, and so they did it again. So in both instances, who is in control? Well, apparently, it's a robot or robots. Now in Loki, we do know there's someone above those robots. He who remains at the end is the one whose plan is going into motion. And those robots are there to enact his plan, to keep the agents moving. In She-Hulk, we just see the robot. But robots don't create themselves. The very nature of a robot is that it's created by someone else to do a certain role. And in here we have Kevin, a robot, controlling everything, controlling this whole storyline. Now, we don't meet his creator, but he has to have one. That's how robots work. And so we know we have someone who wants something done, who creates a robot or robots. Those robots are in the middle of everything, controlling all the people who are getting these things done according to the plan of the person at the top. So we can see that there are so many similarities between the TVA and Kevin and the writers in She-Hulk. But there's one major difference that keeps popping up between the two. In the TVA, we have them trying to enact the sacred timeline. We have the story already written. And these agents are trying to put it into play, trying to keep things exactly the way they're planned. But in She-Hulk, we have Kevin trying to figure it out. We have writers around a table brainstorming ideas to bring forth to Kevin. In She-Hulk, we see they're trying to figure out what they're doing. They're not enacting a set-in-stone plan. So this brings up the question, what came before the TVA? Well, we know that He Who Remains set up the TVA to prevent a multiversal war. We know that his own self fought against other variants of himself, and they vied for control over the multiverse. And so to stop this from happening, he creates the sacred timeline, and he keeps it all linear in this one plan. This plan that's set up in such a way to prevent his other selves from rising to power and starting a war. But what does he need to do to get this in a way that he will not rise up? He needs heroes. That's what we see in She-Hulk with Kevin. He's trying to create a world where the heroes are set up to succeed. He's creating a world where the heroes can figure out how to become their best selves. And this is exactly the line we hear in the TVA. When Mobius is explaining to Loki what Loki's role in the plan is. His plan is to make sure the heroes can find a way to become their best selves.
All so that others can achieve their best versions of themselves.
That is how He Who Remains stops himself. In creating a world with heroes who are very capable, the need for someone else to rise up and take over power isn't there. But what's more, he needs to prevent himself from wanting to take over power. And so he needs to create a compelling story or string of compelling stories in his own universe to distract him. He needs himself to see everything going on around him and to look for answers in the world right in front of his eyes. Because that will prevent him from looking elsewhere, to looking outside his universe. And that's what really keeps the sacred timeline intact. So what we see here, we have Kevin who's trying to write the sacred timeline. He's trying to create stories that are compelling, stories that help the heroes become their best selves. Not just for an audience that they don't see, but for an audience of one. For the future He Who Remains, the future potential King the Conqueror. He's trying to create an entertaining storyline and prevent a multiversal war. So I believe where She-Hulk managed to punch her way into was not just a world creating her universe, but more specifically a world creating the entire universe, creating the sacred timeline. What we saw was the precursor to the TVA. In the end, this just makes too much sense. The TVA had to, at some point, have developed their plan. They needed to be able to know what the perfect timeline would be, to plan out the entire universe into that sacred timeline. And it makes so much sense that King the Conqueror, He Who Remains, who set up the TVA, who put robots in charge, would do exactly what he knows best. He creates a robot that can analyze this data and figure out the sacred timeline. He has people in place to help that along, to think up the story, to put the pieces together. And that is what we see She-Hulk entering. We see her punch her way into not the real world, but the precursor to the TVA. A world trying to figure out where She-Hulk and the other heroes should be going. So what do you think? Do you think I am way overanalyzing what I saw in She-Hulk, trying to force a story in there? Or do you see the connections too? Do you think the TVA could have risen out of that writer's room? Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Is there any other evidence that I missed that you would like to bring up? Let's carry on the discussion. As always, like the video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to our channel if you want to see more theories like this. And as always, thanks for watching.